Yeah, Nika, thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and I do think that that was about the right time that I saw you last. Although I feel very connected with you. Thank God for internet. Imagine this world without internet in the middle of COVID. I think that would have been really tough. So I've been able to keep up with all your adventures because of the virtual connection, and I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful for everyone introducing themselves. Very helpful to know who is sort of on the other side of the proverbial line. And I'm glad and thank you for showing up on the video because it will hopefully make this conversation much more interactive and exciting. I will kick it off by maybe telling you a little bit about myself and what brought me to law and my passion about the future of law. I will talk a little bit about the dysfunction in law, and hopefully we can have an interactive conversation around it because one way or another, everyone here has been affected by laws. And then throughout the conversation, maybe I'll weave what I call 5Ds that will transform law and change the way we have a relationship with law and will affect us in our lifetime. So I am what you would describe a tech lawyer by design. I went to law school after I immigrated to United States when I was 13. I was born in Ukraine, spent a majority of my life before I immigrated in this very cold place in Siberia in Russia, on the most northern point where people have permanent population, so very, very north, with 9 months of darkness and no summer, and definitely a very cold place. And when I was 13, we immigrated to California, and that was effectively like immigrating to paradise because it's very warm as well, welcoming and full of opportunities. We settled in the San Francisco Bay Area. My parents are engineers, right in the midst of Silicon Valley, and so you can kind of imagine what it's like to go from a very cold place with very few opportunities to a very warm place with lots of opportunities. So I compare that to a candy store. We finally got into a candy store and we had a great time gorging on all kinds of candy. And throughout my high school, I had an opportunity to sort of experience the up and down of enjoying that candy through the eyes of two engineers who didn't speak English and was really fascinated by technology and how it shaped our life, how it affected us. Even though I was pretty good at science and math, I did not want to be an engineer, no matter how much my parents tried to encourage me. That was just not my cup of tea at all. And so, in about second semester of my college years, I switched out of engineering department and did other things. And I knew very early on that laws and technology really interact quite a lot and affect each other. And they have a very symbiotic relationship, and that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. And so I went to law school because to become a tech lawyer, to be on the forefront of privacy, security, intellectual property, because I wanted to be part of solving how the technology and laws interact. And my first job in law school, my career is sort of full of iconic experiences. One of them was at the time Yahoo acquired Flickr. Everybody remembers Flickr? Everybody remembers Flickr? So Flickr is the sharing of pictures application, and um, and many of employees at Flickr were PhD. And so Berkeley had a residency required, and they opened Yahoo Berkeley Labs, and I was the legal presence at the time with that group. And it was full of computer scientists and master students and PhD students from information school. And one day we had this conversation very similar to what we have today, where we're sitting around the round table and we were asking what's possible with the cloud computing and location tracking. And what was very interesting in my job as a law student was to write things down and decide which ones of those ideas we should happen, which ones of those ideas would be worthy of companies' investment. And we were sitting around a table and I was taking copious notes. And at the end, I talked to a patent lawyer who asked me if there was anything useful in those predictions, anything innovative. And I remember telling him, you know, they had so many great ideas. Any of them, I guess, are technically possible. And all of them sound somewhat crazy. And I have a hard time choosing. And then what was the ironic part, you know, we chose some of them and we discarded others. But the ironic part is that for the next 15 years, I basically watched every single one of those ideas become service. From Instacart to various social media to various dating applications, you name it. Where my ability to predict future is highly inadequate. It was as good as basically throwing a coin and see where it lands. You know, realizing how much our lives can change and how little our ability today prepares us to predict tomorrow, it has been one of the most humbling experiences of my career. And so I spent the rest of my life basically being at a big law firm, and then I was at a Fortune 500 company called Visa. And then I went to numerous startups, from online dating company to a software as a service company. And throughout that whole time, I've been usually a lawyer for the company, usually the general counsel or a senior lawyer, trying to either take a company public or help the company go through acquisition. And it's been very interesting to kind of be on the journey of seeing how law transforms our lives and how technology is part of it. And one of the things I've noticed is that we have what I call dysfunctional relationship with law. And let me give you some examples, and maybe you can kind of share your experiences in law. But what I mean by the dysfunctional relationship in law is that we have accepted that law, it's okay for us to not to know what the law is. It's okay for us to be completely clueless about the law and not serving us. And that most of the time, we do not know what's in our agreements, what it is that we're signing, and we kind of okay with it. We have developed a complacency to law and accepted the reality that law is not going to serve us. So let me give you a couple of examples when I talk about being about law. Let me give you a couple of examples. So how many people here have signed terms of services when they sign up for any service like Facebook, Zoom, whatever? How many people have actually read this? Or how many people have not read it? I'm a lawyer, I never read this crap. It's not interesting. Even to me, it's deliberately boring. And we're okay signing this stuff because it's not interesting. When you drive in Europe, many of you in Europe, when you drive across the United States, across state lines, the laws change. The speed limit changes, how much marijuana you can have in your possession changes, what's considered alcohol level changes. All of those things change, yet we have no clue about it. We have no idea most of the time what is the law for renters is, what is the law for drivers is. We have no idea what the basic commercial exchanges that happen that change once we cross county lines or once we cross state lines. And we're okay with it. We're completely okay being clueless about our basic rights, about basic basic information that should be available to us at our fingertips. It was very remarkable when I was at many organizations and worked with many business professionals, how many times they were clueless that there is a contract that governs their relationship or their ability to do certain things. And even if they know that there is a contract, they are absolutely clueless what's in it. You almost never get a person who knows what's in their contract, even if it is full of terms that are business related, not even legal related. So we have accepted as a society this ability to be completely clueless about laws and completely not have that information available to us at any time, really, and definitely not at the right time. So I'm going to stop rambling for a few minutes and would like for you to share your relationship with law and whether it has been generally functional or dysfunctional.
Definitely dysfunctional.
Tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a divorce.
Well, let's talk about that.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Nikki, I didn't volunteer that information. You did.
That's true. That's true. Well, I think that what I mean, it echoes to what you're saying, is that it has developed its own language, and I feel like it's every time you're in an industry that has developed its own language, it feels like it has to hide something, and it's proud of being so accurate. But then why do you need lawyers if the language is so accurate? And
why do you need interpreters when things are clear?
Yes. So let's leave it with that contribution to your question.
Without prying into your personal life, let's talk a little bit about divorce generally. How long did it take? Are you still in the process of it, and has it been easy?
About a year.
For about a year.
Not easy. Very intense. So very disruptive.
And how long did it take for you to kind of understand all your rights and kind of where you are?
I think until I would say January 2022.
You remember the day? January 22.
I just went to the time machine.
At 7:15 in the morning.
So yeah, I mean, it's very counterintuitive. It feels weird that, so I'm in a situation that my children are suing me as well. And it feels weird because there is a lawyer suggesting to do this. And she's probably just doing her job, and she's doing her job well, but at the same time, she's separating children from their parents, from their father. And I'm not mad at her, of course, because she's doing her job and I don't care about her. But at the same time, she's doing a job that's responsible for avoiding conversation that people would have if there would not be a lawyer in place at all, right? It's not that you sit around the table and talk. It's just start hiding behind your lawyer, and then it just feels like a job, and you don't think about what you're actually doing. But that's not about the law. It's just about the system, that we're hiding behind law, that we're hiding behind something we don't understand. And I feel like that also stripes off boundaries that we would have if we would sit on the same table with a person.
Yeah, very interesting. And then it took about a year and maybe even longer. And then let's talk about how much. How much expenses did it take to deal with all that?
I guess the total will probably climb up to somewhere close to, and it's cheaper than in the US, to $2,000 a month.
Okay. Well, note to self, if you want to get divorced, get the hell out of the United States. If you get anything out of this conversation, definitely this is one tip.
No.
Oh, Simon, you had something. Why don't you go ahead?
Yes. I would like to add a couple of things. I of course agree with almost everything that was said, but I also would like to mention that law itself is the fundament of a functioning society and democracy, as long as it is functioning. Of course, rulers can then also use the law to lead a democracy into a different direction and go away of it. So I think it's really important to have a law, and I also think that law works for its purpose in many cases. But as democratic processes are also responsible for the evolution of law, it's very slow. So I think the first big problem appeared when the world became globalized, because national laws were suddenly not ready to go for the next steps. But where it's totally true is probably the world you know the best, when suddenly technology companies not only tried to conquer the whole world with their products, but also went into new territories where there was no law and the law was not ready at all for it. And I think this is true for all the companies you named before. And that's why I don't understand that someone who is in that world constantly is confronted with a law that is not ready for it yet.
Yes, there's a law readiness. That's another part. Martin?
Yeah, I mean, what Simon telling us, we have real situations with our startups, and also we have a project with autonomous driving. And we saw it, you have new technologies, and suddenly you have laws from the last century. Was one thing. And sometimes we had a project with flight taxis, with autonomous flight taxis with a Chinese company. So we suddenly had the situation, there have never been a law so far, and nobody in Austria was able to say, can we do, should we do, what is possible? And everyone was not brave enough to just do it. So, and so we couldn't do the project. And this is one thing. And now we have a saying that we say, if you don't have a legal problem, you have not an innovation.
Interesting. Yes. Other relationships with law? Marcus, you go ahead.
You're muted, Marcus.
I'm going to unmute. Most of my relationships with the law have been corporate, commercial deals. And some of them very big. So some billion-dollar deals. And what I found to be interesting is the ethics, not of the law, but of the implementation of the law. And actually it's the ethics of some of the partners and employees of law firms who are under pressure to raise their billing hours and the recovery of those. Almost to the point of spinning out the time it'll take to transact something in order to, it's almost like a plumber who comes around to your house and spends a long time fiddling with a spanner, when in fact he just needs to flick a switch. And I discovered that when I started putting law firms, and we're talking about the Sullivan and Cromwells, the White and Cases, the real big firms, and putting them on fixed fees. And all of a sudden, the numbers of people in meetings disintegrated, and the amount of time it took to reach decisions disintegrated. So I got a healthy, or maybe a skeptical opinion of where it is. And I think a lot of people get hijacked by lawyers, especially, so I was acting as a principal. People down the line in companies I've been involved with, who are not spending their own money, are spending the corporate money, are quite happy to spend a huge amount of money on lawyers to effectively protect their backs, as opposed to coming up with what is the solution here. So I think it's something about not the law, but it's the way it's interpreted and implemented, which is part of the problems I've found.
Yeah, yeah. Other observations? So what I find very interesting, especially in the age of COVID, is that we now have pressures on courts to embrace technology. And you see all the reports of courts around the world, including United States, finally having conversations like this on video, finally having trials on video, and various management conferences on video. I find it ironic. I'm just going to ask you a question before we go further. Do you know what year Zoom has been founded in? Anyone? Google? It's 2011. Almost 20 years ago, Zoom was founded. Today, 9 years ago. Today, 10 years ago, and this technology has existed well before Zoom. Today, finally, a decade later, the courts have finally discovered this technology. It only took a decade for a court to make trials on video, to make access to conferences easy. And it only took a global pandemic for the courts to recognize what the rest of the world has been happily using every day in the corporate America. And I find this mind-blowing because it highlights that a number of problems that we have discussed, but that the main problem is that our systems, our courts, and whether those systems are government systems or corporate systems, they're not designed to serve us. They're not designed for humans to be included. They're not designed to make your relationship with law being functional, and they're not designed to be easy, and they're not designed to be accessible. In fact, they're designed to be exactly the opposite. They're designed to be inaccessible, they're designed to be expensive, and they're designed to keep you away from it. And that is fundamentally what's wrong with law. It's not necessarily the law itself. It's not the black on white, although there's that problem as well. It is that the enforcement, the institutions around, whether they're corporate or government, they are meant to not give you access. They're meant to keep you away. And what we have been seeing, one of the trends that we have been seeing in law and frankly other technology is decentralization. It's one of the Ds that I tend to discuss. We have quite a lot of information that is available online. Sometimes it's difficult to interpret. Sometimes it's difficult to know which one is important. It allows increasingly access to information to folks who have not had access. We increasingly see in law many professionals enter who don't have a law degree, who are not members of the bar. So we see that kind of democratization of access and information that is happening. And that has been going on for a while and has been absolutely snowballing during COVID. And we see that, you know, people are no longer accepting not having access or not understanding their rights or not being able to settle their disputes or deal with their problems. And because of COVID and other disasters, we see a movement towards greater and greater access that has been a problem for us for a while. Marcus, you talked a little bit about having different competing interests in the corporate world. How do you think the kind of more democratized access would help to solve that problem?
Well, I don't know. I think lawyers are going to find a problem in somehow not. So lawyers over our way, corporate lawyers are charging upwards of £1,000 an hour. So it's what, $1,500 an hour of their time. And if you democratized it, I'm guessing people would say it's a ridiculous amount of money to pay. And I'm guessing the legal profession would make very strong arguments that, I've spent years getting to the level which I can rip people off.
Hard work, Marcus. It's a lot of hard work to be a professional. To be a professional at it.
They tell me that I'm an accountant. It's easy, really.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So that's a natural question, and you see it all the time. As soon as you make it democratic, as soon as you make it transparent, people like Marcus, intelligent people, ask a very intelligent question: why? Right, and that answering that question, why, and the opportunity that is available, that's what drives further democratization. Another big trend, and again, they all happen to start with D. Yeah, it is digitization. We increasing, when I started practicing law about 15 years ago, I had an authentic experience of reviewing actual physical documents in boxes and trying to make sense of them. In fact, there was a moment in time when I was heavily pregnant, sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes, looking through papers, and my husband said, "Olga, I think I failed you. No pregnant woman should be sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes. That seems like an awful experience for you." But what we are seeing today is that documents prepared, originated as digital files. In fact, many of them are never becoming physical files. And what that allows to do, when you have a document that was created as a digital file, it is actually a completely different thing. It is less of a document and much more of a file. It has a history. It sort of becomes kind of like a person. It has connections to people who edited, to places, to various links. When you sign a contract today, and if it's gone through numerous approvals, it's gone through numerous edits, what you get at the end is less of a document and more of a file. It becomes more of a digital asset. And that digitization, this asset view of document, of everything we create, allows us to have new ways to interact with documents and new ways to automate them. So we see that all parts of documents, whether they're contract or court documents or deeds, whatever those things are, their creation, their management, their negotiation is being digitized. And that allows efficiencies, that further allows to ask questions: why are we paying so much? And then most interestingly, we in the future we will be able to digitize not just creation, negotiation, and management of those documents. We will be able to digitize performance. And what I mean by that is sometimes we write great papers, we write great contracts, but the question is, what happens after? And for those of us who have been in corporate world, and if you don't know what's in your contract, it becomes very interesting to say how do you monitor performance? How do you know that what you have agreed to in a contract is actually happening? I'll pick on somebody else. Whoever in your life has signed a contract online to access some services, and you haven't read, how do you know that you are doing what you're supposed to? I mean, you signed it. You check the box, you put your digital signature, you agreed. You're a decent person, you respect the law. You certainly would not call yourself a pathological liar, right? how do we know that what we agree to online actually happens?
I call myself pathological, idealistic, consciously idealistic.
More or less
Naive.
compliant, more or less what I agreed to. No, that's exactly right. So, and what digitization of all aspects of papers allows us to link our actions to our words. And so contracts become more than just pieces of paper. They becoming sort of actionable documents connected to the real world and having implication and abilities to have conversations of whether or not those asks have been reasonable to begin with, and what the consequences for wrongdoing. And that's a different world than we're used to. Imagine a world where if you, your promise to not do certain things had repercussions. Wouldn't you want to read that contract a little bit more closely? Imagine a world if you have been alerted every time a company has misused your personal information automatically. Wouldn't you want to get in touch with the company and ask them, what the heck were they thinking? And what are they gonna do about making you whole, right? Because right now, it's just you signing and it's an empty promise. Okay, any thoughts about this? This is gonna be more fun if we interact and we share our experiences.
Well, I'll toss something in there.
Go ahead.
Part of my coaching practice, I've worked with a number of universities, and one of them in San Diego. To become like a contractor for the university, you have to sign this agreement, and it's not too onerous, but it's probably, a dozen pages. And there's all of these stipulations in there, which are really designed, all of them, to protect the university, not to protect me in any way. And there was nothing in there that I thought would prevent me from working with them, but you always have this thing in the back of your mind that says, once I sign this, if they view that I have violated any of those clauses, it basically says they can come after me in a court of law and all of this kind of stuff, so that it makes you hesitate before you actually sign it. Now, of course, I know the people at the university, and this has been around for a long time, and I couldn't imagine that they would actually go out and misrepresent what was going on. So I felt very safe in the end. But there was still that moment where I'm thinking, I'm signing my rights away here, it feels like. And if something goes wrong, then I have to hire a lawyer at God knows how many hundreds of dollars per hour. And so the entire liability, I would end up paying a lawyer more than what the university probably owed me. So sometimes you just make that decision to say, it feels good, feels okay, you sign it, and just hope that life works itself out.
Let's hope for the best. So Mark, did you ask in your conversation, did you raise this, when you read this and you were sort of wondering, why am I signing this? Did you ask people you're dealing with what it is, and is it necessary?
The clauses in there were pretty straightforward. That I had to deliver goods based on the timeline agreed to in the contract, that sort of thing. There was one stipulation in there that I could not use their logo in a way that implied that they were supporting my work without having a written agreement from them to do that. So I've read through so many contracts over the years that I could see the lawyer at every point going, oh, let's make sure that we're protected here, we're protected here, we're protected here. You know, that if anything I did caused harm to somebody else, that they would be held harmless for that. I said, you know, I'm coaching speakers. I don't think the building's going to burn down or something like that, which could be very different for somebody who was like a contractor who was actually going to work on a building where stuff could fall down and they could hurt people. And so as I read through it, I thought if I was a different kind of contractor, I would probably be asking a lot of questions.
Yeah, so you're signing a contract that may or may not be even applicable to you, but just in case Mark becomes dangerous and does something other than teaching people how to speak, we'll put a bunch of clauses that may not be relevant. Let me talk about another trend. Another trend in law is diversity of thought. What you see is that law, you know, historically had a fairly homogeneous group of people that you know used to interpret words on a piece of paper. Law is increasingly about much more than that. You know, data, it turns out, is very useful in law. It allows you to see what's, for example, in your documents. It allows you to track behavior. It allows you to have a different, better relationship with law. And so what you see is that one, you attract professionals into the law who may not have a law degree. And we've had this trend for a little while, and increasingly you see more and more cross-pollination between law and other fields. Data is being one of them, computer science being another, various business applications, speaking, for example, is another one. So, so you absolutely have more of diversity of thought that is coming into law and traditional institutions. And with that, there's a big question is what and how you should do and how do you train the future lawyers? Is it enough for future lawyers to just be trained in reading and interpreting code? And what I liked about the conversation when we started, when Nikki alluded to this lawyer who is leading a discussion at the table, has no clue about dynamics of his family, yet this person is hiding behind law and making an impassionate decision about his future and the future of his child and the future of his assets and whatever. And really what Nikki is kind of saying is this person qualified? Sure, she may be able to read code, right? Sure, she may even know the history of that code, and sure, she may even understand the intention. But does she understand my situation? Does she understand what's happening? And increasingly, the answer to that question is no, and it's highly unsatisfying, right? Because lawyers and institutions around law make decisions that impact our lives. And it is helpful to have, yes, it is helpful to understand law, and yes, it is helpful to understand other things. For example, the history of what happened and psychology of people involved and data behind it and on and on and on. And what you see is that law increasingly attracts more and more professionals who are not necessarily trained lawyers. And what these people bring are skills and know-how to make this field much more exciting and to serve the recipients of law, which is really all of us, in a much more intentional way. So Nikki, let's talk about your divorce at a high level, not specifically. What knowledge do you think would be helpful for the person to lead the discussion in your divorce, other than, of course, law?
So, that probably doesn't answer your question, or maybe it does, but I know from not only experiences, but there is a role, and that's the mediator in lawsuits, specifically in divorces. And I'm just surprised that this has never been offered. I feel like there is law, and law gives guidance and security and direction and limitation and all of the good stuff. But that needs to be applied if there's something, or I feel that needs to be applied if there's something in danger. In most of the cases in a divorce, there's nothing in danger. It's about different interests. It's about different people come from different directions, and that's why they separate. But the best scenario is that both of them can steer in a new future where they can be in the same room without turning their heads in a different direction, right? Even more if you have children together. And I feel like, I mean, I don't know about social skills of a lawyer. I don't know how much lawyers have learned to distance themselves from individual crises and situations, because otherwise they can't do their job, right? They can't be connected, they can't be attached. But this is not, well, I would say they can't be 100% attached, and they shouldn't be 0% attached. So where is that drawer? Where is it supposed to be, that lever where they say, hey, this is not about law. This is about, we should find someone who mediates between the two of you to find a solution. Because also I have this feeling that a client for a lawyer is X amount of 400 euro per hour. And now the lawyer found that, hey, if the children sue their father as well, it's 2 more clients with X amount and 400 euro per hour. And is the job of the lawyer to secure law by filling their bank accounts? Or is it also include or involve a social responsibility? And I totally lack the latter.
Yeah, you feel a little objectified when somebody thinks of you as X number of years per hour, right? If there is something human left there. Marcus, go ahead.
It seems to me that most of our laws have been derived from coming up with a fair and equitable solution. And then if there's a disagreement, which argument wins over against what has previously been agreed seems a reasonable and fair equity way of doing things. In the case of Nikki, it looks as if the overall objective of law, which is to reach a fair and equitable solution, has somehow morphed into what are the contractual obligations. And so therefore I'm guessing Nikki's battle with kids suing is because they feel that they have to have an arbiter, that their argument is this and somebody else's argument is that. So the court decides which argument wins. And I don't think the courts are there to try and decide what's fair and equitable anymore. I think the law decides what the law is, and the courts are to say which argument wins. Not necessarily which is right. It's just which argument wins. Which lawyer has put forward the best case.
Everything I heard about lawyers and court in Austria is at divorces, the question is, who of the two is more hated by the judge? And that's not funny.
It's only funny when you're not part of the procedure. Nikki clearly doesn't think it's funny. Simon, go ahead. We have 1 minute left, but why don't you add?
Well, it seems that we're more easy. You have to cut, Olga. You have to cut.
I would like to support what Nikki said about mediators. I think there are a lot of lawsuits and a lot of cases where it doesn't need to go to court if there's a conversation and a solution, because I don't know, a very high percentage of all lawsuits are actually within families where it's about actually emotions and not the laws, and then the lawyers do the work. And I think Italy took a very interesting approach. For almost every lawsuit, you are obliged to have a mediator before, and I think it's even true for the case of a divorce. And the mediator is there to find the solution before it gets before it gets dirty. And they are also trained in emotional skills and are maybe then better in finding a solution for that.
We do in the UK, it's called a case conference. So when papers are filed, there's then a case conference in most cases where the judge will get the two parties together to try and iron out whether you really need to go to court or whether mediation will work. But that is all predicated on papers having been filed.
Olga, you have a hard cut.
I have to go. Everyone, it was a pleasure meeting you all. I hope you got a glimpse into the future of law. I am really excited about it. Looking forward to staying in touch with all of you.
Thank you so much for taking
Thanks a lot. Thank
The
you.
conversation could stay for like forever.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Nick, for having me. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.